Every month, the same transaction, same date, same amount. $2,700 sent to a woman named Alicia, family support. My husband called her his sister, a sister I had never met, a sister he never spoke about unless I asked too many questions. "You don't know everything about my family," he'd snap. "Stop acting paranoid." Paranoid. That word is how liars keep their lies alive. One night, curiosity stopped asking politely. I opened his laptop as he slept. No password change. Men get too comfortable when they think you're blind. Emails, hidden folders, receipts with her address printed in bold. The address he claimed belonged to his childhood home. My heart didn't race. It died. The next morning, he left for work. I drove the opposite direction, following the trail of my disappearing money. 2 hours later, I arrived at a neighborhood he told me he couldn't afford to live in. Children played outside a cream-colored house with a blue door that matched his eyes too closely. Then I saw him, my husband, carrying groceries, smiling like joy was his native language. And when the door opened, the woman who hugged him wasn't a sister. She was a secret. But the worst part wasn't the kiss she gave him, or the toddler calling him daddy. It was the realization that I had been financing their happiness and my own heartbreak. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I simply drove away with a new plan growing inside me. Let them enjoy their comfortable life, because soon every dollar they depend on will disappear with me. Stay till the end. You'll see how a quiet woman can take everything without raising her voice. After seeing Marcus holding another woman and kissing a child who looked like a miniature clone of him, something inside me did not break like a fragile vase on a kitchen floor. It hardened like steel in fire, and I realized that he had spent years sharpening a lie that he believed I would never discover. A lie that walked out of our bank account every month at the exact same time, wearing the name Alicia Xiaoe. Family support, like a convincing disguise, and all that time I thought love required trust, but now I understood love required evidence. I drove home without crying, without shaking, without screaming, because sometimes silence is louder than heartbreak, and revenge plans itself in the quietest rooms. That night, Marcus smiled at me with the same lips he pressed against her, kissed my cheek as if deception tasted like affection, and he asked what I cooked for dinner while I stared at him like a stranger renting space in my life. I served him a meal he did not deserve and listened to his lies rehearsed with confidence, like he had told them so often they were now part of his DNA, and when he fell asleep snoring with a peacefulness earned by a guilty conscience that thinks it is too clever to fall, I unlocked his laptop again, not because I needed more proof, but because collecting ammunition before a war is always wise. Every tab I opened was a confession he didn't expect to write. Email receipts for gifts shipped to her from stores he never took me to, rental payments for a house that was nicer than our own, photos hidden in a folder labeled work files, where smiles looked natural for him in ways they hadn't for me in months, maybe years. He didn't hide well because men who believe they control the story never think someone else is holding the pen. My best friend Natalie sat across from me the next day as I showed her everything. She looked ready to burn the world down on my behalf, but I told her no, fire is too quick and too visible. I wanted frostbite, the kind of cold that kills gradually while the victim still thinks everything is fine. She asked if I would confront him, and I told her calm people make better decisions than furious ones, so I would let him believe he still owned the narrative while I quietly rewrote the ending. Marcus had one weakness. He trusted me to handle our finances because he thought money bored me. It amused me instead how a man can be so foolish that he doesn't see the person who pays the bills is also the person who controls the future. I checked the accounts he never bothered to look at because he assumed ignorance made me obedient. He did not know that I never forget numbers, and I had already begun shifting funds out of accounts with both our names and into ones only I could access, accounts he would never trace until the day he woke up and couldn't buy his own lies anymore. He continued disappearing every Thursday night, pretending overtime paid his sins, kissing me goodbye with the same mouth that lied to me daily, and every time his car pulled out of the driveway, my fury sharpened as quietly as scissors cutting paper. I met with a private investigator who worked without judgment, who recorded every moment Marcus spent inside that house, who captured every cheating smile with timestamps that would one day cut deeper than any knife could. Alicia finally answered the message I sent, full of arrogance and ignorance, telling me to stop bothering her man and to move on with my life, insisting that Marcus chose her because I wasn't enough, and reading her message didn't make me angry, it made me grateful that Marcus exposed himself to someone just as oblivious as he was, because stupidity makes revenge easier. Marcus started to notice I wasn't reacting the way he expected. I stopped asking where he was going, which made him uneasy. I stopped leaving dinner warm for him when he returned late, which created tension. I stopped waiting by the door like a loyal puppy, which threatened his ego more than any confrontation could. One night, he slammed the bedroom door and accused me of being distant, ironic coming from a man who built an entire second life 2 hours away. A man who could teach classes on emotional abandonment while pretending to be the victim. I simply told him, "You're imagining things," handing his own manipulation back to him without raising my voice. Men like Marcus think chaos equals control, but real control is knowing the exact moment to let a liar believe he's still winning. I filed away every document, every bank statement, every photograph, every receipt of betrayal, not because I needed reassurance, but because when I take everything from him, and I will, there will be no argument, no shouting, no denial strong enough to save him from the truth he built and handed to me piece by piece. He created another life with money I earned, time I gave, love I poured, and while he believed he registered me as blind, what he actually did was teach me how to see clearly. I never wanted revenge before, but he groomed me for it slowly with each lie, and now I would collect my payback silently, gracefully, and without remorse, because he thought he had 2 homes. Soon he would have none. Marcus began to feel something slipping, though he couldn't name it. He would stare at our bank app longer than usual, scrolling up and down as if the missing numbers were hiding behind the decimal point. He tried laughing it off when I walked into the room, forcing that careless grin he always used to patch up cracks in his confidence. But I noticed the tension in his shoulders and the way his hand clenched the phone a little too tightly. The man who once bragged he paid all the bills had no clue that the money he wasted on his mistress was drying up at the source. Me. He cleared his throat one morning and said he might need to borrow some cash until payday. I asked what happened to his paycheck, and he mumbled something about fees and bank errors, reaching for excuses like a drowning man reaching for a rope that isn't there. I handed him a small amount with a polite smile, watching him leave the house like a king, pretending he still had a kingdom. The private investigator sent me a weekly update folder neatly organized with timestamps and audio recordings. I listened to him telling Alicia he finally felt free and that his wife barely noticed he was gone anymore. He had no idea I was building an entire case against him, brick by brick, lie by lie, until the tower of his deception would collapse and bury him underneath it. It was almost sweet, how confidently he underestimated me. He bought Alicia a bracelet with a credit card I canceled the night before the purchase, and when the store declined his payment in front of her, the embarrassment clung to his face like a second skin. Alicia texted me again, calling me pathetic for trying to ruin their love, unaware that I had already succeeded long before she pressed send. Marcus confronted me angrily that night, accusing me of messing with accounts. But I only raised an eyebrow and asked why he cared so much about one transaction. He stuttered, turned red, and claimed he was just checking on our finances like a responsible husband should. His lies were becoming sloppy. His confidence was cracking. His world was shrinking. He started watching me more carefully, asking questions he never used to ask, like where I was going and who I was meeting. Suddenly, the husband who disappeared every Thursday demanded transparency from me, as if my independence threatened the balance of his double life. I found it interesting that a man who claimed I was overthinking everything now couldn't sleep without checking my location at least once. Thursday nights became especially entertaining. He would say he had a late shift, then return home earlier every week to see if I'd notice. I pretended not to, letting him believe he was still the smartest person in the room while he unknowingly confirmed his guilt through every anxious move he made. He was losing trust in his lies, and that was the first fracture I needed. One afternoon, he stood in the doorway watching me arrange flowers on the dining table. His silence hung heavy, dripping with insecurity he couldn't swallow. Finally, he blurted out, "Do you still love me?" The question almost made me laugh. He wasn't searching for affection, he was searching for control. I placed a lily in the vase and turned just enough to show him the calmest version of myself. "I love peace," I said, "and right now, I have it." He didn't know what to do with that answer. He looked confused, even hurt, like he expected me to cling to him the way Alicia did. That was the moment he realized something dangerous. I had stopped caring about his validation. Nothing unravels a narcissist faster than irrelevance. He left the room stiff and silent, and I followed with my eyes only until he disappeared from view. The man who thought he had me wrapped around his finger was now tangled in the threads of his own fear, trying to guess what I knew and what I planned. He would lie awake nights imagining scenarios that might expose him, and each guess would be wrong because he couldn't imagine a woman like me choosing strategy over heartbreak. Marcus used to think betrayal destroyed the betrayed. He didn't understand betrayal also awakens the strategist. The first fracture had formed, and he could feel it. A small crack running through his perfect facade, not visible to the world yet, but widening beneath the surface. Every day, every lie, every missing dollar. The fracture grew. Soon it would shatter him completely, and he would have no one to blame but himself. Marcus used to complain that I cared too much, that I worried too much, that I asked too many questions. Now he complained that I didn't care at all. The irony tasted sweet every time he tried to provoke a reaction from me and failed. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply gave him nothing, and nothing hurt far worse than rage ever could. He would sit across from me at dinner, staring, waiting for me to notice he wasn't eating, waiting for me to pry or comfort or beg. I sliced my food slowly, chewed quietly, and smiled like his absence from my heart was the most peaceful upgrade of my life. He started checking my phone whenever I left the room, and when he didn't find evidence of betrayal, it frightened him more than if he had. Because guilt cannot comprehend calm. Guilt assumes war. Calm means the war is already won. Natalie called one evening and asked if I felt guilty staying silent. I told her guilt is for people who still love. I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. Marcus began rehearsing lines in the mirror before work. Practicing affection, he no longer knew how to perform naturally. "Good morning, beautiful," he'd say, too forced, too late. I responded with a simple, "Morning," and walked away. I didn't hug him at the door. I didn't ask when he'd be back. I didn't track him anymore, because the investigation already did that for me. Funny how a man who denied giving himself to someone else now struggled to prove he belonged to me. He tried suddenly bringing home gifts, cheap flowers, small accessories, little tokens of desperation. He hoped the gesture would remind me to be grateful. I accepted every bouquet without a thank you and placed them in a vase beside the trash can. A reminder, temporary beauty dies fast. One night he tried initiating intimacy, leaning close like nothing had changed. I moved slightly, his lips missing my cheek by an inch that felt like a mile. He froze. That inch was the widest distance he had ever experienced, and he couldn't cross it. "What's going on with you?" he asked, voice cracking beneath the weight of insecurity. I looked at him for the first time in days, looked into the eyes of the man who spent my money loving another family, and I answered, "I finally understand your language." He didn't know what I meant, and that terrified him. He wanted emotional meltdown, hysteria, tears, weapons he could use against me. Instead, I gave him indifference, the kind of indifference that signals freedom. He didn't sleep that night. He tossed, turned, left the bed, paced the hall, checked his emails, checked his bank accounts again, tapped through his texts with Alicia to reassure himself that someone still needed him. He thought I was slipping away, and he was right. He called Alicia at 1 a.m., whispering in the kitchen like a teenager hiding from parents. "I think she knows something," he said. Alicia asked why he thought that. He answered, "She's too calm." Even his mistress understood what that meant. "Calm women are dangerous," she warned. He came back to bed and stared at the ceiling for hours. Meanwhile, I slept peacefully, because when the enemy is already losing, you rest. The next morning, he rushed to beat me out the door, pretending he was eager for work, but really he was running from dread that followed him like his own shadow. I let him leave first because victory tastes better when the opponent keeps hoping he still has a chance. Every step of distance I put between us tightened the knot around his lies, and he could feel it. His eyes were always darting, his temper short, his confidence drained. He used to leave this house like he owned it. Now he left like a man waiting for it to disappear beneath him. Fear had moved in, and I slept next to it every night. The emotional switch was complete. He used to worry I'd leave. Now he worried I'd stay, just long enough to end him properly. The thing about men who build second lives is they never imagine the first life will ever read the blueprints, and Marcus lived like a man who assumed secrecy was a permanent condition. So when the private investigator handed me a small brown envelope filled with copies of loan applications, forged signatures, and a deed that tried to move one of our investment properties into a shell company he controlled, the world didn't explode. It rearranged itself into a battlefield I knew how to win. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I paid the investigator. I made one phone call to the lawyer I'd quietly met with weeks earlier, and I set the pieces in motion without fanfare because quiet is cleaner and it leaves less evidence for the guilty to hide behind. Simone Hale arrived at my kitchen table at noon wearing a suit that meant business and a face that never tolerated nonsense. And she read the documents as if they were nothing more than a tedious piece of paper until her jaw tightened and her pen began its own work, writing notes and circling figures that spelled theft. "He tried to mortgage your share of the family rental," she said finally, voice even. "He forged your signature on a line that moves millions. That's not a lover's mistake. That's felony material." I slid a copy of the marriage photographs across the table for her to see, the same photos Marcus used to charm guests while he siphoned our life into another address, and Simone nodded. "We stop him today." Stopping Marcus did not require theatrics. It required paperwork, a well-timed phone call, and a bank manager who remembered doing business with me for 20 years and respected the handwriting on my signature card. We filed temporary restraining orders around the accounts he thought he owned. We put a freeze on a suspicious mortgage application, and we notified the county clerk that a fraudulent deed attempt had been made so that any transfer would be blocked at the source. And as each institution returned my call with compliance, I watched his kingdom crumble one compliance at a time while he still believed he had control. He noticed first the small humiliations because liars see the world as a series of obstacles, not collapses. His credit card declined when he tried to pick up extras for the little boy who called him daddy. And when Alicia asked what was wrong, he lied about bank errors, which sounded thin even to her, and later that night he came home and accused me of sabotaging him. I poured him tea, served him dinner, smiled like nothing had changed, and when he demanded access to the accounts he used to think were his, I handed him a printed statement showing that the accounts were on temporary hold pending an investigation. He read the words, and the face he aimed at me changed from anger into the first raw taste of panic. He called his friends, his sister, his broker. Calls went unanswered, messages unread. He called Alicia, and she answered with a voice I'd learned to listen to closely, breathless and scared. "Marcus, what's happening?" she whispered. He told her to come over, and she did, but she arrived with a different look on her face the moment she saw the mail we had placed on the kitchen counter. Formal notices, bank letters, a civil process server's envelope that was very realistic and very real. I watched her color drain, watched the bravado slip from her like lipstick being wiped clean, and for the first time, the woman who'd smiled at me through a screen looked like someone who had been handed a truth that burnt. I didn't confront Alicia with anger. I bought her fear and exchanged it for a simple choice. I sat her across from me at my table, laid out the copies of receipts and the photographs, and said in the calmest voice I could manage, "You can walk away, and I will make sure you are safe, or you can stay with him and be an accomplice to fraud and possible charges." She looked at Marcus and then down at the evidence. The man she loved had placed her on a foundation of other people's money, and his construction was failing. She begged quietly, "I didn't know." And the truth was obvious. She did not know because he had hidden everything in plain sight until I decided to read the ledger. Simone filed the civil injunction that afternoon, which meant Marcus could not touch a single asset tied to our names without legal permission. And that evening, a sheriff's deputy knocked on his door with a subpoena tied to the forged deed. He thought it would be a temporary inconvenience. He walked out smiling for one of his last photos of confidence, but his smile died in the car as messages piled up. Calls from his broker, a note from his employer asking for an explanation, and finally, a curt email from the contractor whose name had been used on the fake mortgage application, someone who never signed anything and who would now be a witness against him. I watched him shrink as if from cold, because that is what exposure does. It removes warmth. He paced the house like a man trying to remember how to be brave without a script. He tried to bluster at dinner. "I'll fix this," he insisted, voice thin. But Simone had already drafted notices to the county prosecutor, and she told me quietly over the phone that criminal referrals were moving faster than anticipated. I let him rant and I let him worry. I recorded nothing. I shouted nothing. I simply continued my life like a woman with a secret advantage, and that advantage was timing. The major incident was not a single blow, but a timing of papers and freezes, and the turning of systems that men who assume power can't predict. By the time Marcus understood the depth of the ruin his greed had created, creditors had reopened lines of inquiry. Alicia had packed a bag and left with nothing but what I allowed her to keep, and the sheriff had asked him politely to come in for questioning. He called me from a gas station afterwards, voice hollow and small. "Please, I'll explain. Please don't do anything until I can—" I let him speak until he ran out of breath. I had already done everything that needed to be done. I had preserved my security, removed his access, protected the child whose face looked so much like his father's, and set the legal machinery moving so that every lie he had told and every check he had cashed against my life would be documented and punished. Revenge does not need shouting when it has lawyers and ledgers and perfectly timed freezes. It was quieter, it was more absolute, and it was finally inevitable. When he realized he had nothing left to steal, not even the bravado he used to wear, the collapse was complete, and I sat in the quiet house at midnight and allowed myself the smallest smile, because the proof was not in a scene that would air on any channel. The proof was in the paperwork, the court filings, the frozen accounts, and the sound of a man finally understanding that he had built his new life on another person's work, and that work had been reclaimed, legally and ruthlessly, without a single raised voice. Marcus's downfall didn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It crept in like fog, quietly suffocating the world he once controlled. Every morning, he woke up with new fear in his eyes. He checked his phone before he breathed. He called the bank before he showered. He searched for answers no liar can find. He started wearing worry like a second suit. When he tried to log into the accounts, the denied access screen greeted him coldly. He slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen flickered, a perfect metaphor for his life. I sat beside him sipping my coffee, reading the newspaper like nothing had changed. Indifference was the most violent response I could give. He needed control. I gave him uncertainty. One evening, he stormed into the bedroom holding a stack of mail, all bad news wearing official seals. "What did you do?" he demanded, voice cracking under the weight of panic. I didn't look up from folding laundry. "You always said I was just a housewife," I replied. "Why would you assume I had the intelligence to do anything?" His mouth opened, but for the first time in our marriage, he had no script ready. He backed out of the room speechless, because now his fear was bigger than his ego. He began reaching out to Alicia more desperately. I saw every message through the mirror of his panic. "They're investigating me. I'm losing everything. She knows something. She's destroying me." Alicia stopped replying entirely. Mistresses love excitement, not consequences. She blocked his number within days. Rumor spread fast. Co-workers avoided him. His supervisor called him in and asked about fraudulent activity tied to his name. Every lie he ever told lined up to testify against him. He walked out of work trembling. A man who once strutted now stumbled. That night he tried a new tactic, fake honesty. He sat beside me at dinner and said, "I've made mistakes." I calmly placed my fork down. "Mistakes are accidents," I said. "You lived a plan." He looked at me as though I had peeled away his entire body and exposed nothing but guilt, and I had. Without a single raised voice. Men like Marcus don't know how to fight silence. They swing their arms wildly hoping to draw blood, but never land a blow because quiet people are impossible targets. He started crying, not out of remorse, but out of fear that his safety net had holes he never noticed. Fear that the woman he dismissed had outgrown the cage he built. I stood up slowly and walked past him without touching his shoulder or offering a sympathetic glance. Empathy is a gift, and I no longer bankrupt myself for liars. Late that night, I heard him on the phone talking to some lawyer he found online. "I need help," he whispered. "My wife she's doing something." The lawyer responded loudly enough for me to hear. "What exactly did you do?" Marcus didn't answer, because answering honestly would confirm his ruin. I slept beautifully every night. He didn't sleep at all. He kept pacing the house, checking locks, flinching at shadows, startling at every phone buzz as if reality would leap out and grab him. He kept staring at me across the room as though I were a ghost returning for revenge. Not a ghost, Marcus. A woman alive enough to bury you without dirt. He tried one last manipulation. "I know you still love me." I laughed softly, the first emotion he'd seen from me in weeks. "No," I said. "I just love watching karma work overtime." His face cracked. The confidence, the arrogance, the entitlement, all split into pieces too small to reconstruct. Marcus wasn't destroyed by evidence. He was destroyed by doubt, by a calm woman who no longer cared about his existence, but still owned the power to erase it, by the silence that followed every lie he told, by the realization that the side woman he built a life for had already jumped ship because survival chooses winners, and Marcus was not one. Soon he would discover just how much of his life depended on the woman he betrayed. He thought I was fragile. He thought I was naive. He thought I would break, He thought wrong. The truth didn't arrive in a shout. It arrived in envelopes stamped with state seals and consequences. 2 weeks after the accounts froze, Marcus received a call from the district attorney's office. Not a warning, not a suggestion, a summons. His face turned a sick shade of gray that clashed with the confidence he used to wear like a suit. He tried pretending it was a mistake. He practiced lies in the mirror again. He rehearsed excuses like prayers, but prayers don't help men who worship deception. Simone Hale arranged everything. Our financial documents neatly bound in a folder that could end a man's credibility forever. Forgery, asset concealment, financial betrayal. The law doesn't care about heartbreak. It cares about evidence. I sat across from her at the table reviewing each page, the receipts that proved he used my money to build a life I wasn't invited to. Simone looked impressed. "You did most of the work for me," she said. "I simply paid attention," I replied. Marcus didn't know that attention is the most dangerous weapon a betrayed woman can carry. When the day came, Marcus walked into that legal building like a king, marching toward his own execution. He expected me to come crying, or screaming, or begging for reconciliation. I arrived in a navy suit and heels that made my steps sound like determination. No tears, no tremor, no weakness. When he saw me, he whispered, "You're really going to do this?" "I already did," I answered, because by the time a guilty man asks that question, the decision has already become history. We sat with investigators, and Simone laid out the evidence piece by piece. The fraudulent loan applications, the forged signatures, the unexplained money transfers, the photographs, the recordings. Marcus tried to deny, but his name and handwriting laughed in his face from every page. "Sir," the investigator said calmly, "your wife isn't accusing you. Your actions are." His shoulders sagged under the weight of defeat. His voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. "What do you want from me?" he asked. I leaned back in my chair, composed. "I want you to live the life you built," I said, "without me." The silence that followed was heavier than any sentence. After the meeting, we walked outside, the sun too bright for a man who lived in shadows. Alicia was waiting in the parking lot, arms crossed, face furious and scared. "What did you drag me into?" she demanded. He whispered something pathetic, but she wasn't listening anymore. She looked at me. "Did you know about the child?" My heart paused, but my gaze remained steady. "I knew enough," I said. Her own truth spilled then. "He promised we'd have everything." "Yes, everything built with my sacrifice." "You can keep him," I told her. "He just can't keep anything I paid for." She turned away from him. No embrace, no sympathy, only rejection. He lost his mistress before he lost his marriage. Delicious timing. Later at home, Marcus confronted me one last time. He slammed the door, stood in the hallway shaking like a man facing execution. "You ruined my life," he spit out. "No," I corrected. "I stopped you from ruining mine." "You loved me once," he whispered. "I loved a version of you that no longer exists," I replied. "And what about everything we built?" He tried again. I smiled without warmth. "We didn't build anything," I said. "I built. You stole." He didn't have a comeback. Cowards lose their vocabulary when the truth speaks. The divorce papers were served the next morning, neatly placed in his hands by someone in uniform who didn't care about his excuses. He couldn't stall. He couldn't negotiate. He couldn't manipulate. Because I controlled the assets, the house, the investments. Everything he once bragged belonged to us, that he secretly hoped belonged to him. It all stayed with me. Simone ensured the court recognized my contributions and his exploitation. He left with only his clothes and a phone full of numbers that no longer answered. Natalie asked me if I felt powerful. Powerful wasn't the word. Justice wasn't enough either. What I felt was restored. My name, I told her, is no longer tied to a liar. She raised her glass. To liberation. I raised mine. To the downfall of men who think women don't notice. Through it all, Marcus never understood the hardest part. I didn't ruin him out of anger. I ruined him because he thought I was too stupid to ruin anything. He calculated that betrayal would go unnoticed. He miscalculated the woman he married. He once said money made him feel like a real man. He forgot who made him rich, and now he remembers every time he opens his empty wallet. Marcus didn't fear losing love. He feared losing control. That's why, as soon as he realized he had none left, he tried reinventing himself as the victim. He stormed into the kitchen one evening, eyes wild, hands shaking, holding the divorce papers like they were a threat I couldn't possibly enforce. "We can fix this," he said, a sentence built out of panic, not hope. "You don't want a divorce," he insisted. "You're just angry." "No," I said, "I'm done." My answer was a scalpel, clean and sharp. He stepped closer like proximity could rewrite reality. "You're my wife," he said. "No," I corrected him. "I was your provider, your cover story, your financial parent, never your partner." Stunned silence. He looked like I finally named the demon he was trying to keep disguised. He tried grasping at dignity. "We shared a life," he whispered. I leaned in just enough for him to feel the frost in my voice. "We shared expenses. The life was yours alone." His pride cracked again. He needed to control something, anything. So he tried the oldest weapon, guilt. "What about the child?" he asked harshly. "You'd let him grow up with nothing?" I stared directly into his eyes. "I didn't bring that boy into this," I said. "You did. With lies." His breath faltered. "If you cared, you'd help," he muttered. "I helped," I replied. "Every month, every dollar, every sacrifice, and you spent it pretending I didn't exist." The truth did not shout. It sliced. Then came the last card he had. "Please," he begged. "I'm already losing everything." "That," I said, "isn't loss. It's return." He shook his head, grief twisting into rage. "You planned this," he accused. "You trained me for it," I countered. He grabbed the counter to steady himself as though gravity had turned against him. "What am I supposed to do now?" he whispered. "Live the life you built behind my back," I answered, "without my money to hold it up." His knees almost buckled. It was the first time I saw the reality settle. His other family did not want a broke man. Alicia did not want a burden. Love built on lies does not survive truth. He followed me to the living room, but I refused to turn toward him. He needed closure. I owed him none. "You can't just leave me with nothing," he pleaded. "I didn't," I said. "I left you with exactly what you earned." He opened his mouth again, but there was nothing left inside him to weaponize. His manipulation failed. His control evaporated. His identity crumbled. And finally, the man who once strutted with pride stood before me broken by a woman he underestimated. There is no louder revenge than a quiet woman walking away while a guilty man begs. I picked up my purse, opened the front door, and without even looking back, "Lock up when you leave. It's not your home anymore." He didn't move, couldn't move, because that was the moment he realized he lost me long before he ever noticed. And everything he lied for? Gone. Not taken. Returned to its rightful owner. Marcus imagined the worst was behind him after the confrontation, but consequences don't operate on his timeline. They operate on the truth's timeline, and truth was just beginning to cash every debt he owed. Within the week, his employer suspended him pending review of the investigations. They didn't fire him out of loyalty. They did it because it looked bad to keep a man accused of fraud handling company assets. So his paycheck froze faster than his access to our joint accounts had. He used to brag that his job defined him as a real man. Now he avoided the mirror because even his own reflection refused to recognize him. Simone notified me that the court approved my protective orders and financial safeguards, granting me full control of all marital assets pending divorce proceedings, because evidence is the only witness who never changes their story. Marcus tried to claim half of everything, but forged documents and secret spending with a mistress are not persuasive arguments in a courtroom, especially when a woman like me walks in prepared. He watched as the judge's signature transferred every home, investment account, and significant asset into my sole authority, not by kindness, not by pity, but by the law that punished the thief who married a woman he underestimated. He left that courthouse alone, holding a folder of legal defeats that weighed more than any suitcase he owned. He called Alicia again and again, but she didn't answer, not since she realized that he couldn't pay her rent or feed the child she mistakenly believed he would care for. When she finally unblocked him long enough to deliver one final message, "We can't be part of this," he shattered whatever remained of his pride. The boy who called him Daddy would not remember his face long enough to mourn it. Meanwhile, I was busy living. I repainted the kitchen, not because it needed color, but because I wanted a space untouched by lies. I bought myself new linens and new furniture, and new stability as a celebration of truth reclaimed. The house felt lighter when his belongings disappeared. The air tasted fresher without deceit, breathing next to me at night. Peace is expensive only for those who don't deserve it. Natalie and I sat in the living room drinking wine, toasting to the end of manipulation disguised as marriage. "He thought he had you trapped," she said, swirling her glass. "He thought wrong," I answered, savoring the simple pleasure of not flinching anymore. I slept like a woman who belonged in her own life again. Marcus, on the other hand, wasn't sleeping at all. He paced the tiny room he rented, the only space he could afford without my income, staring at letters taped to the wall as though he could argue with printed truth, past due notices, legal fees, declined credit, an eviction warning for the mistress's place addressed to him because, of course, he signed the lease with confidence he never earned. His fantasy family now treated him like a disease they were relieved to overcome. He asked to meet me just to talk, still assuming he had a right to any moment of my time. We met at a quiet cafe, neutral ground, where his eyes clung to me like a lifeline. "I lost everything," he confessed, voice shaking. "Then you finally understand what you put me through," I said, sipping my drink with calm precision. He wanted sympathy. I poured him clarity instead. "You did this to me," he whispered, more accusation than apology. "True," I said. "You taught me exactly how to treat someone who betrays you." He blinked, maybe searching for the woman who once cared enough to cry for him. She was gone. She left the night he walked into someone else's arms and called it love. He begged for another chance, but apologies arriving after consequences are not apologies. They are survival tactics, and I do not rescue men from traps they set for themselves. "Live the life you earned," I told him, standing to leave. "I'm finally free of the one you stole from me." His final attempt to control me dissolved into a single defeated sentence. "What am I supposed to do now?" I let my purse slip over my shoulder, looked him straight in those desperate eyes, and answered softly, "Grow up." I walked out before he could respond, because closure is not a conversation. Closure is a decision. I chose myself. Everything he thought he secured vanished. Everything he thought he controlled collapsed. Everything he thought I would never know became the knife I used to cut him loose. He once believed he was 2 steps ahead. He never noticed who laid the path. Justice didn't save me. I saved myself. Justice simply confirmed what he refused to learn. Never betray the woman who holds the keys to the life you're pretending to live. Once Marcus was gone, truly gone, the house exhaled. Every room felt wider. Every morning tasted clean. I woke up without checking the clock for his schedule, without waiting for lies to tumble through the door. Silence was no longer something I feared. It was something I owned. I renovated not just the home, but the life inside it. New paint, new plants, new memories forming in spaces he once polluted with deceit. The kitchen, where I once cooked waiting for a man living somewhere else, became a place I cooked for myself, with pleasure, not obligation. The bedroom, once a graveyard of suspicion, became a sanctuary. I slept in peacefully, legs sprawled, dreams uninterrupted by betrayal. Natalie visited often, bringing laughter into corners that had forgotten how to hold it. We joked about the sister who wasn't a sister. We toasted to the masterpiece of a downfall that he scripted and I directed. We agreed that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's restoration. I got a promotion at work. Turns out confidence flourishes once you stop watering someone else's ego. I traveled to a place I once said we would go together, and took pictures he would never see. I chose clothing he once said didn't suit me, and looked stunning in every mirror he avoided. My lawyer finalized the divorce with a signature and a stamp. When the court officer asked if I wanted to change my last name, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. I don't carry dead weight anymore. They handed me my new identification. I held it like a rebirth, a license to thrive. As for Marcus, the whispers say he's still struggling. Financially, emotionally, reputationally. The world isn't cruel to him. He is merely experiencing life without me holding up the ceiling. I never go near his new address, not out of fear, out of distance earned. I close the chapter without ripping pages. I lock the door without leaving a window cracked. I didn't forgive. I didn't forget. I simply moved so far beyond him that he no longer exists in any direction I look. He wanted a life where I didn't matter. He got it. And now he finally understands. Some women don't scream. Some women don't break. Some women rise, quietly, completely, and leave you choking on the silence. That's who I became. 5 years later, sometimes I drink morning coffee on my back patio, watching the sun rise over a life that belongs entirely to me. The air feels cleaner now, not because anything outside changed, but because the toxins inside my home were removed like a disease caught just in time. I don't think about Marcus much. Thoughts of him come like old spam mail, irrelevant, easily deleted, no emotional weight at all. I started mentoring women who survived financial abuse, women who, like me, once believed loyalty meant sacrifice. I teach them that sacrifice without reciprocity is slavery in disguise. They call me inspirational. I simply call myself free. Natalie is still here, laughing with me on Friday nights. Sometimes we joke about Marcus and his second life that never got the chance to become a first. The joke always lands because the punchline is this: he dug a tunnel to escape me and instead trapped himself underground. I heard he works in a warehouse now, paid hourly, living paycheck to paycheck in a place where pride can't afford rent. Alicia left him and took the child with her because love built on stolen foundations collapses without ceremony. He has no wedding, no mistress, no money, and no audience for the pity he uses as currency. The universe doesn't forget. It collects debts. But the sweetest part isn't his ruin. It's my peace. I didn't just survive him. I surpassed him. I'm not a woman scorned. I'm a woman reborn, with fireproof skin and a future too bright for traitors to enter. He once thought I'd never find out. Now he'll never forget. What would you have done if your partner secretly funded a second life with someone else? Would you walk away quietly or take everything they thought you were too blind to see? Tell me in the comments, because your strength deserves to be heard too. And if anyone has ever doubted your sanity just to hide their lies, this story was written for you. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories. And tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from. I love to know how far these stories travel.